Hello, everyone. My name is Sabrina Fox, and I am founder of Good Girl to Goddess. I am so delighted that you are joining us today for this empowering conversation to change the narrative around women's menstrual cycles. We are going to tap into our feminine power, and to do that, we have two amazing experts with us today who I'm excited will introduce themselves in just a second. But before that, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on me and on Good Girl to Goddess so you have a little bit of context for why we're all coming together here. So I founded Good Girl to Goddess about a year ago, and it is created to support women in living with more authenticity, joy, and peace. And it is designed for busy women because I know for me, I did not have time to run off to, a spiritual retreat for a week or, to find other ways of creating more peace and joy and productivity and authenticity in my life. I had to, I had to do that in my day to day, living. So to do that, I was basically over the period of about a decade very miserable in my job, feeling very demotivated, and just knowing that what I was doing was not working. It was not what was right for me. So I needed to find something different. And I go into a lot more detail about that in the Good Girl to Goddess program itself. So I won't take up much more time on that here. But one of the offerings of the Good Girl to Goddess program are workshops like these, where we bring together experts in their field to support women in this path from a sort of conditioned idea of who we are and who we're meant to be and how we're meant to show up in the world to a really truly authentic and self truth belief of who we are and how we want to show up in the world and how we deserve to show up in the world. So today the focus on women's menstrual cycles is very much around let's debunk all the myths and all the narratives that have been handed to us throughout the years, and let's actually think about ways that we can view our cycles and even moving into the menopause with more empowerment by using the latest support and research and ways of doing that. So today, to help us with that, we are joined by Pankti and Anna. I'm going to hand over to Pankti first, who's going to introduce herself, and then Anna will do the same, and then I will kick off the rest of the session.
So hi, everybody. I'm Pankti, like Sabrina mentioned. I'm a productivity expert, and I used to be an actuary as well. So I've worked in the financial services industry for a long time. And what prompted me to change my career was the overwhelm that I felt when I was trying to do everything and be the superwoman that I was supposed to, or in my head, that's what society expected me to do. So now it's my mission to help my clients and move them from overwhelm to taking action on a consistent basis, but in a way that works for them based on their brain chemistry and their body's hormones as well. And why am I talking about hormones? The main thing is, I remember for 25 odd years, I was just raised in a culture where your menstrual cycle was just an inconvenience that happens for 4 days in a month. You don't really talk about it. You don't complain about it because that's a sign of weakness and you just get on with it. However, when I retrained in psychology and neuroscience, I came to know there's a lot more to your hormones, and they have more function than just reproduction. They impact your energy, their mood, your cognitive abilities. And I wish I had the knowledge that I have now in my 20s to really make an impact in my career. So that is what I'm helping a lot of my clients now with, combining the power of your hormones with productivity in a way that works for you so you can achieve your goals and balance in life in whatever form that looks for you.
Thank you, Pankti. That's fantastic. And we're so excited to hear from you on all of that. Anna, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm Dr. Anna Cantlay. I'm a GP by background, but my specialist area of interest is in women's health and in particular in women's hormones. So I'm a member of the National Association of Premenstrual Syndromes, and I'm also a British Menopause Society accredited menopause specialist. So I really love supporting women across all phases of their life, but I'm very, very interested in areas of hormonal vulnerability. So that for me, that's postnatally, also premenstrually, and around the perimenopause and menopause. I think for me, what triggered my passion in this area is my own experience postnatally with postpartum anxiety. And that happened very predictably for both of my postnatal periods at a time where I really felt my hormones shifting. So that really lit a fire in me to understand female health and female hormones even further. We are woefully poorly educated at university, at medical school, on areas like PMS, PMDD, and perimenopause and menopause. So a lot of this I've had to seek out through postgraduate training, and I'm a medical professional, so you can imagine what the situation is like for women out there who are trying to understand what's going on. And similar to what Pankti said, your menstrual cycle is so much more than just the 4, 5, 6 days that you have your period. It's this whole cyclical change that happens that we really need to understand, so that we can work with it rather than against it.
That's fantastic. And it is like a little bit scary to think that there is not as much education on this, even for doctors, though I have to admit that does align pretty well and sort of explains some of what I went through on my own journey with my menstrual cycle. Kind of feel like a few pieces of the puzzle dropped into place there when you said that. I actually suffer from PMDD from probably when I was in law school. Actually, I remember exactly, there was like a cycle when it all kind of happened, and I think there was something about the stress of law school that intensified things for me, and it just went straight into my menstrual cycle. And I suffered with that for the next nearly 20 years. I had psychiatric diagnoses of bipolar disorder. I went to so many different doctors. Just I was it was debilitating at times. It was difficult just to be in the world and to survive day to day. I definitely relied over a period of time on Valium for the anxiety that would come up with PMDD. It was just really, it was a really intense and difficult time. And after I had my son, I also had postnatal depression. But like nobody, nobody, you know, I didn't have any sort of, diagnosis of that, if you will. Like nobody sort of told me what the warning signs were that I should be looking out for, or, it was sort of like, oh, well, you just had a baby, so you're overtired. So that's probably why, you're feeling blue. And it's just sort of like, there was no recognition or understanding of what I was going through, which made the whole process that much harder, because you sort of feel like you're gaslighting yourself. Like maybe I'm making this all up. Like maybe I'm just weak, or, and I think that is a narrative that flows through a lot of these issues. Is it's sort of like, well, maybe I'm just not tough enough. Maybe everybody else is stronger than me, or, I'm just crazy. But came through that, thank goodness. And then went on to develop adenomyosis, which is a really painful, condition of the uterus, a sort of scarring of the uterus. I'm sure Anna can explain much better than me. But then that added on top of the mood issues a level of pain that I was in every single month during my cycle. And obviously pain also affects your mood. So there was there was a lot going on. So by the time I got to my late 30s, I started to consider having a hysterectomy, because I had tried every other thing that was made available to me. And I say made available to me because I know now that there are so many more resources available to women that I was not introduced to, and that I now am on a mission to ensure that women are aware of, because I don't want any woman to be in the position that I was in, where I was forfeiting my ability to have more children. I had to make a very stark and difficult choice. I felt like I was choosing my health and happiness now in sacrifice of my potential family plans for the future. Now, I mentioned I thank God have a son. He's wonderful. He's going to turn 18 in a couple of weeks, which is it blows my mind to even say that out loud because it went by so fast. But I did want more children, and even though I wasn't married at the time, I used to sort of think, well, you never know what's going to happen. The love of my life could be, just around the corner, and now I'm going to have to go out with people and say, well, just so you know, I can't have children, and that's like a big, that's a big no for a lot of men, and it just changed. There were so many things about that, Joyce, that really changed my life. Now, having decided to do it and going through the surgery and opening my eyes at the other side, I genuinely felt, even from very soon post-op, that everything was different. Like, I felt completely different. I felt like this huge burden that I had been carrying was like just gone. It was actually miraculous. So it did help, right? The mood issues were gone. The pain, once I recovered from the surgery, it was gone. I didn't have that following me around all the time, and also like the anticipation of the pain is like a whole other level of difficulty. How do you get through the day when you're like, okay, well, tomorrow I'm probably not going to be able to do anything, so I better get everything done now. And being terrible to family and friends and my child, and just not even really understanding, so all of that was gone. And I am grateful that I had the option to have that surgery. I know a lot of women, because it was privately, it was done sort of private medical care, and I was very blessed to have that option. I know a lot of women struggle in the NHS to try to have the same surgery, that also kind of get, well, is it really that bad, sort of thing, I've heard a few times. So yeah, so I am grateful where I am now, and I am on HRT now, because obviously I have no female, reproductive organs at all. I mean, I have no ovaries, fallopian tubes, everything that was making those hormones for me. Though Anna's probably going to tell me that the hormones are also made in other places, but I take them topically now, right? So I just, every night before bed, I'm like, have, I rub my uterus or my ovaries on my arms or whatever, it's just like, here's what I'm doing. But it's tricky to keep that kind of in sync. And I'll talk a little bit more when we get to the HRT part of our conversation, about some of the nightmare moments I've had being poorly advised on my HRT. But that's where I am now. So I feel like I've experienced every single aspect of this process, except feeling really empowered and like aware of what my cycle's doing and how it affects me and how I can affect it, so that I don't feel like a victim to it. So with that in mind, and that kind of backdrop there, I think it's a really great segue to bring Pankti in to talk to us about all the positive aspects of this part of us as women that we can really leverage for our productivity and to create more balance in our lives.
No, thank you, Sabrina. That's right. I think that's the thing. The topic of hormones, especially women's hormones, have such a negative connotation. And I think it's high time we start taking a positive spin towards it, because, like we said before, they do much more than just help you with reproduction, right? So I'll tell you a little bit of my story and how in more detail. So like I said, I was an actuary. I used to specialize in insurance M&As. So most of you who work here as a lawyer will know it's long hours and it's a very stressful job. Though before kids, I really liked it. It gave me that adrenaline kick that I needed to get up and get going, and I loved what I did. However, having two children really impacted me. I was roaming around like a headless chicken from projects to projects, trying to look after them, making sure they eat healthy, making sure they have everything they need for their development, to an extent where I literally burnt out. And that's when I took a break. I quit the job that I liked doing and decided that my focus was going to be my family. And then that got me into this whole psychology, neuroscience aspect, because I was just interested in how your brain works, what you do. And then I came across productivity from a neuroscience perspective. And then I started thinking about hormonal changes that women experience. And it is funny, I can tell you that the work environment is built around a hormonal cycle, just not a woman's hormonal cycle, or the man's hormonal cycle, because they do have a hormonal cycle, which is a 24-hour cycle with, I mean, I'm sure Anna can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understand is obviously with their hormones peaking midday and going down in the evening. So the 9 to 5 traditional job has taken that into consideration, just not for a woman. And that's when I started looking at how we can, no, I mean, we're not going to change the 9 to 5, but there are ways we can make it better to work for us. And that's when I started looking and researching into the different phases of of the menstrual cycle and what the different hormones bring with it. So, there are days you must have noticed where you feel like you're on fire. You can do everything. You can smash those meetings, have those difficult conversations. Fast forward to a week later, and you don't feel that confident anymore. All you want to do is sit down and watch Netflix, which is not possible if you are have a family and if you're working. But it's just, bringing those awareness and then thinking about it and harnessing those hormones and what they bring with it and planning your routine. So if you registered, I think for this webinar, you were sent across a workbook that I have used with for myself and my clients. And what it does, it shows you different phases of your cycle, tells you a little bit about, I've instead of the scientific terms, I have used something very simple that you can think about. So, the first 4 days of your cycle. So that's an undated planner for you to plan. But the first 4 days of your cycle are the time when you need to reflect and really recharge, because that's when your cognitive abilities are quite high. So, it's just about start thinking about your goals and putting your work goals or personal goals based on a monthly cycle rather than a quarter or annual. And once you start working with that, you can see how you can improve your productivity. So there are some questions that you can think about. What are your priorities? What habits? Because a lot of times I work with people who say this is what they want to do. But then when you ask them, okay, so what are you doing to make sure you achieve that? It's far off. There's a difference between reality and expectation. So it's about becoming aware, reflecting on that. Then thinking about any mindset shifts that you need to have, any beliefs that you need to look into, especially the limiting beliefs that you need to overcome. And then start making those little changes or sustainable habits that will help you achieve those goals for that month. The next is your superstar
Sorry,
phase.
I just want to interrupt and say I love these affirmations. I really love it because one of the things Good Girl to Goddess really emphasizes is that we've got narratives going on in our heads all the time, which normally are based on things people told us maybe when we were kids or things that we're hearing from peers, society, etc. But we have control over what we say to ourselves. It does take dedication and practice, and we recommend meditation, for example, as a way of harnessing more control over your focus and your thoughts. But this is a great example. You know what, rather than saying like, oh God, I just feel tired and I'm never going to get anything I want, and I have to work really hard to achieve all my goals, the world is set against me, etc., etc. Like, why not just be like, you know what, I am a powerful magnet for success and abundance. Everything I desire flows to me with perfect timing. And I promise, like, whether or not you believe it, the environment of your head will be a different place. And over time, you're going to notice more the aspects of your life that match with what it is that you're saying to yourself in your head. Because we all have a mix of everything. And if you're focusing on the negative, you will just see the negative. Like, it's this kind of, it's this sort of like blinkers approach to life. But if you're really focused on the positive, you will just see more of it naturally. That's what you're going to be noticing. So I just wanted to call that out as an absolutely brilliant aspect of this. And also, this idea of self-limiting beliefs and mindset shifts is also a central aspect of the Good Girl to Goddess program. So I'm loving this so far, Pankti. Apologies I just needed to
Oh, that's
tell you
fine.
that it's great so far. But
No.
please lead us through. Oh, Anna, did you want to mention something there?
Yeah, it was just something aligned to that kind of affirmations and manifesting your outcomes and kind of building that in I learned something really interesting at a entrepreneurs retreat the other weekend, which was, I'm constantly learning more and more about the brain. I find it the most fascinating organ, but there's an area of our brain called the reticular activating system. And it's a network of neurons in the brainstem that's essentially helps to regulate things like alertness, wakefulness, but it's also a gatekeeper of sensory information. And you might have noticed that, you know, let's say you go out and buy a car, you buy a Tesla or something, you then start seeing Teslas all around. And that's because your brain, you're kind of manifesting that through this reticular activating system, which is basically filtering your sensory environment. So you can kind of train your brain, and that's kind of what manifesting is all about, isn't it? You can put those positive messages in, you can feed that information to it, and then it will filter out and show you that in your environment. It's just fascinating.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant. Thank you, Anna.
And I mean, that's the thing, right? They say you need to have some good mentor, even for your career or progression, or people who are going to support you, think about you in the same way you think about yourself, not pull you down, but like propel you to go forward. That's why you need that kind of support to make sure that keeps happening, that rewiring in your brain keeps happening.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so then we move on to the next phase. And this is when, you know, you have all the energy, motivation, creativity kicks in. And I would suggest this is the best time to start looking at what's challenging. What's the thing that you really don't want to do because you're scared about it? And brainstorming ideas because, you know, it's funny. And like I said, it doesn't have to be when you're doing this workbook. For me, luckily for my husband, my best ideas come when I'm washing dishes. So it's my task in the house, and he's very happy about it. But it's just find something because a lot of times that's when you can keep it in your subconscious mind and the solutions will come up and then start taking a note of that. And again, a lot of times there might be something big, like, you know, a big thing that is challenging you in terms of your narrative and your mindset, and you might need help. And it's good to talk about these things and open up about them, whether it is in your work life or in your personal life. So, and this is a good time or phase in your cycle to do it.
That's great. So when you need to have those difficult and challenging conversations, this might be a good time to do that. And I think
Yeah.
we'll talk more about this later, but you know, it doesn't need to just be information you're providing to yourself. This can also be information that you're sharing with your partner. So they're aware, like if there's something really tricky you want to say, just put that down on the calendar for days 6 to 14.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you're negotiating, I would definitely try and do it in the next phase because that's when your oratory skills are amazing. So if you're going to have an difficult conversations at work or something that you want to share, like we said, with your partner that you know is when you will have to go back and forth, then this is the perfect time to do it because you might just come up on the top because of your
Amazing.
oratory
So
skills.
that's day 15 to 17 is the
Yeah.
typical conversation time. Okay, so this is more the, you know, when you want to kind of tackle new projects and challenges and brainstorm, you've got like that burst of energy and sort of creative power.
Yes.
Amazing. Okay, that's great. Wonderful.
And then finally, obviously, it's the last week, you know, when you've noticed I mean, what I used to notice before I understood the productivity side was this was the time when I just wanted to eat a lot of carbs. Obviously, there is some scientific reason behind it. But this is the time when you really need to slow down, giving yourself that permission, which I remember never giving myself when I was working. It's okay to slow down. It's okay to take those days, think about self-care. And it's also the time when you are really focused on detail. So it's good to like do the work, review your projects, look into it. You will be really focused and get that attention that you require. It's also a time to dial down on the social aspects of life if possible. That's when boundaries come in. Look
Mm.
at what you really need to do, what you can say no to, and how you can look after yourself at this time so you're geared up for the next phase. I'm sure Anna can add more here than I can from a scientific perspective.
Yeah, so I think all of what you say there is really interesting because if we think about what's normally happening in our luteal phase, which is around this period that you're suggesting here, this is very much a nesting phase from an evolutionary point of view. So, you know, we're more introverted, we're maybe sort of getting things ready, or we're kind of finalizing plans. It's quite an executive getting things done, but it's not necessarily about those big creative ideas. It's sort of nesting and kind of going into the detail, as you say. So I think that's really interesting. I was just going to mention that I think it's just important to say not all women are the same with their menstrual cycles. And so as part of building that awareness in, it's really important for you to understand what your normal is, because some women will perhaps have a shorter luteal phase, or symptomatic part of their luteal phase, whereas others will feel symptomatic much more of the month. It may be that women feel really good when estrogen is high, kind of in the build up towards ovulation, but for some women that are quite estrogen sensitive, that can also flare symptoms. So whilst this is a good foundation, it's just also about kind of building in that awareness of what works for you and then mapping it out against that as well.
Yes, no, definitely. I think that's the thing. I think what I'm trying to say is just become more aware. You will know what your body is telling you, and it's okay to go in sync and align your work and your personal life along with it. And this is just a tool that can help you. It doesn't take a long time, just 15 to 30 minutes every month to review it, look at it. And it just gives you that change in perspective and shift that you might need. And it will also help you start becoming more productive, because you are doing, when we talk about productivity, it's about doing something that you enjoy, that you will keep doing. And once you're aware of that, you can harness the power of your own body to help you. And like Anna mentioned, it doesn't have to be exactly those days. It's like when you feel what is happening, when you feel, okay, this is when I am being more creative. I have my ideas. Make a note of them. You don't have to go and execute them at that point. It's just so you don't forget when there is so much else going on and you're running around like a headless chicken. It just helps you become more strategic about how you approach work and life as a woman.
Absolutely. And I think that's, it's going to help you become more closely connected with yourself and with your own body and your own body cycles. And another one of the aspects of the Good Girl to Goddess program is that we invite women to really come back into their bodies, because we spend so much time, especially as high flying professional women, and frankly even moms, like looking after their kids, like you're in your head. I need to do this at this time, somebody needs to be here at this time, picking up this person at this time, I have this call and I have this meeting and I have this idea, and and then the worrying and the ruminating. And I know for me, I probably spent like my entire adult life just in my head. It was like this echo chamber of, self-criticism and kind of anxiety and planning and ruminating. And, I was ignoring my body, and my body was sending me signals that things were not right. And you ignore your body long enough and you will get sick. That is just a fact of like biology. It will just keep knocking on the door gently, 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 and then louder and louder and louder. And I talk in the program about all the different ways that my body just started to break down because I wasn't listening to it. And so it turned up the volume so much I couldn't ignore it anymore. And then I started to realize there were deeper messages coming through for me besides just, a sore neck and headaches. It was like, well, this whole way that you're organizing your life is not right. It's not in alignment with who you are and how you want to show up in the world. So, you need to change it, right? And I think this process painting that you're encouraging women to go through is beautiful from that perspective, because it really is a checking in, as Anna says, at whichever time in your cycle and how you feel, just checking in on that. What is that like for you? These are sort of guidelines for how it might be on the average, but every single woman is going to have a different experience with her own cycle. And the more you can really tune in on that and be conscious and aware of that, then the more kind of control and empowerment and agency you will have in your own life and with your own body. Anna, did you want to add to that?
Yes, I did. And it was just to pick up on a point that you said at the beginning when you were sharing your journey, Sabrina, about, sometimes that feeling that we're too sensitive, or we're told we're too sensitive, or, oh, that's a weak emotion. And actually, I mean, the female brain is just the most wonderful, wonderful creation. And the corpus callosum, which is the bit in the middle that connects your two hemispheres, it's bigger in women, and that basically helps us to be more attuned to social cues. We're much more intuitive. We are more sensitive because evolutionary wise, we've had to be able to pick up on nonverbal clues. I don't know if you've ever had the sense that your intuition is just, you knew something was wrong before it actually was wrong.
Yeah.
That's because our brain is very much different. We've needed to be that kind of mother bear, looking after the offspring, multitasking in that kind of mode. So we have so much emotional intelligence because of that. So actually, if we can reposition that actually as a superpower and push back on that narrative that we're oversensitive, actually that is a really massive skill that we can read these social cues and be able to act on them.
Absolutely. And I think that being sort of like gaslit by that narrative has caused a lot of women to disconnect from their intuition and second guess themselves. And like, I'll never forget the moment that like I walked out of the tube to meet this guy on a date, and like I got this massive intuitive hit like he's not a good one. I of course just ignored it because it's like, oh well, I don't know, that's just nonsense. Like I don't know, I'm second guessing the situation for some other reason. But then of course it all played out and he was not a good one. Like that initial kick was actually spot on. And I could potentially have saved myself many months of anguish if I had listened to it rather than watching it all play out in real time. So I love knowing that there's a part of our brain that's actually doing that for us. And I think there's something really important about reconnecting with that intuitive side of yourself and allowing yourself the opportunity to listen to your intuitive nudges, even as a test, as practice, to kind of prove to yourself that they have some weight, they carry some validity. And, even if it's just like 1 out of 5 times, just see what happens when you follow your gut rather than going with what it is that your head is telling you. Because your head is definitely going to be the place where all your conditioned and mostly limiting beliefs are stored. So to go with your gut instead of your head 1 out of 5 times and see what happens could be a really magical way to test this theory, right? That we actually have an intuition which is super heightened, and it's a gift and a superpower.
Yes.
I
I
love
mean, to be honest, we've always been asked to take it down, right? As women, if you want in the professional world, if you need to get those man traits, like be aggressive and all. But no, I think if you dial into your intuition, starts rewiring your brain, you will automatically get more confidence and you can solve the problems more easily. And that's the kind of leadership that is required to succeed now.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And frankly, the world needs more now than ever before a whole load of switched on, tuned in women who are listening to their own bodies, cycles, and signals and messages and deploying that wisdom out into the world. So I think we are all well served. And I know a lot of us good girls are, massive people pleasers. Like the best way that you can benefit the people around you is by dialing in and tuning in with your own truth and wisdom, and then using that as the way that you behave and you show up in the world. So, yes. Amazing. I love all of that, Pinky. Is there anything more that you want to share with us, or also we just want to remind attendees you can pop questions in the Q&A box as we go along. You can go use the webinar chat, however you want to communicate with us. Like, we are here in real time to answer any questions or thoughts, or hear your perspectives as well. So I just want to check in with you, Pinky, if there's anything more you wanted to mention before we head over to the next topic.
Just a small bit. I mean, obviously, every woman is at a different phase. And like we said, their cycles are different. And this tool or productivity doesn't have to stop when your hormones, like when you reach menopause. It's something that you can incorporate and still carry on, because I mean, even after menopause, your brain, you have a long life left. Your brain is going to help you work. You can rewire it. You can start using the neuroscience aspect of it to get you going and keep you creative and more efficient and effective in your life.
Thank you. I love that. That's a really beautiful invitation for everyone. Anna, we are going to hand over to you if you want to make any closing remarks on that, and then we'll move into more wisdom and information around perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention this here because it seems like it's sort of most aligned with Pankti's session, and that was just around any special considerations that we might need for women who have ADHD.
Mm.
What we know, and we don't fully understand it, but what we know is that women who have ADHD or are neurodivergent in other ways will have a heightened hormonal sensitivity. So the way that they respond to hormonal fluctuations in the brain will be heightened. And so in terms of a menstrual cycle, that can sometimes be quite problematic because there will be points of the cycle where they are definitely feeling it more. If we look at PMDD, for example, which we'll go into, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, background prevalence is about 5 to 8% of the general population of women of reproductive age, but actually around half of women that have ADHD would meet the criteria for PMDD, which is really interesting. And it's often at times when estrogen drops that women are more symptomatic. So that's premenstrually, but actually there is also another dip after ovulation. And there's lots of reasons why this happens, but it's thought to be due to things like dopamine and serotonin and the knock-on effects that estrogen has on these important neurochemicals in the brain. So just another consideration as the kind of prevalence of ADHD and awareness of ADHD is increased, that this can be a sort of tricky thing to get on top of as well.
Thank you so much for that perspective. That is just stunning. That statistic. Wow. I mean, that's I had never heard that before. That's really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Wonderful. So I think what I'd like to talk about now is just a little bit about kind of hormones as an overview. And just to go back to what I said at the beginning, I'm particularly interested at these periods of hormonal vulnerability for women. We know that if you are a woman of reproductive age and you're having menstrual cycles or assigned female at birth, that about 90% will have a degree of PMS symptoms, premenstrual symptoms. So these are symptoms that tend to manifest in the luteal phase, so that second phase of your menstrual cycle after ovulation. An interesting fact for you, even though 90% of women get a PMS symptom, at least one PMS symptom, 5 times more research money is spent on erectile dysfunction. So just to kind of set the context here, we are battling against a tide of data gaps, research gaps, and in terms of clinical care, massive inequalities. So I think the key message is always for me, if you can do one thing to empower yourself, it's to start symptom and cycle tracking, because if you can start to build in that awareness, then you can notice changes, you can notice how you feel, and you can start to align your life and your kind of monthly plan around that. And also, it's so powerful for you to be able to take that information to a healthcare appointment if you are having symptoms that you're struggling with, because the more information you're able to provide, the easier it is for your clinician to help you, particularly in the context of an NHS 10-minute consultation. So I really encourage you, there's loads of different options out there. Please do look at symptom and cycle tracking.
So we have provided to you a symptom tracker, which has been sent to us. Thank you so much, Anna, for sending this through, that you can use. Again, this is taking your power, right? This is your cycle. This is how your life is unfolding, and how your cycle is impacting your life and your body. And that is like, knowledge is power. All of this is going to help you to go into each of the stages of your cycle with more awareness, and with awareness you have incredible power. So I think that's just a wonderful resource and suggestion, Anna. So thank you so much for that. You will all have that in your emails, a link to download this resource.
Yeah, so I can't take any credit for that. That's from the International Association of PMD, which has got some fantastic resources. And I thought I could spend ages recreating that, but that really is one of the better symptom trackers out there. I think in terms of premenstrual, what we now say is syndromes, there are lots of different subtypes beneath that. So for some women, it might be that they actually already have a pre-existing mental health diagnosis, but they're getting a premenstrual exacerbation of symptoms. That's still managed and approached in a similar way, but they've got that sort of pre-existing mental health condition in the background. For some women, they might be no mental health history. They might be really well in at least 1 week of their menstrual cycle, and then they'll be very symptomatic across perhaps 2, sometimes it crosses over into 3 weeks. So I do have some women, as you correctly said, that have been completely misdiagnosed as having a personality disorder or even bipolar because of the cyclical nature of their symptoms. But when someone's actually sat down and got them to do some symptom tracking, we're building in that awareness that it's related to the menstrual cycle. And I support a lot of women with premenstrual dysphoric disorder. I have to say I got no teaching on this at medical school.
Oh, that just breaks my heart.
It was, again, something that I think there's still a complete lack of awareness amongst the medical community about it. I think the tide is changing, and we're talking a little bit more about it in the media, and there's been some good awareness campaigns. But even if you ask, a lot of the sort of normal population, a lot of them won't have heard or understood what PMDD is. Just to kind of explain a little bit about that, because it can be a very devastating condition for a lot of women. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder, it's a cyclical hormone-based mood disorder that happens in the luteal phase, predominantly in the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle, and normally is relieved by the point that you have your period, although the symptoms can cross over into the period itself. And the key is that it's cyclical. So you have a bit where you feel well, and then you have a bit where you feel unwell. And it's characterized by severe PMS-like symptoms. So this includes needing to have both a physical symptom, so that might be things like breast tenderness, bloating, extreme fatigue, as well as psychological symptoms. And for some women, those psychological symptoms can be very severe. So it's not uncommon for me to meet women who've thought about wanting to take their life in their premenstrual phase of their menstrual cycle. This happens to about 5 to 8% of women, and to be honest, that's probably an underrepresentation, I think, because a lot of women probably haven't built that awareness in at the moment. And I think a lot of what I do during the first few consultations when I'm supporting a woman is really go back to basics, discuss a lot about what we've been talking about here, about getting to know your hormones, getting to understand your hormones, building in that self-awareness, symptom tracking, and then building in your coping strategies so that you can not necessarily make the symptoms go away, because we know often more help is needed, but certainly build in that kind of toolkit so that we can support emotional and physical well-being as much as possible during your luteal phase. And I think I've introduced I've shared another plan here, again from the
PMDD self-care.
That's it, yes.
Yeah, let me share my screen for that one as well.
Again, not one I can take credit for. It's from the International Association of PMDs again. But what I encourage my patients to do is you can build your own, have a bit of a luteal phase planner, put it on the fridge, share it with loved ones, share it with partners or housemates.
Yeah, this is, you can write here. Yeah.
Exactly. So you want to start to understand, when are the dates that you're likely to be feeling worse. So if you have a predictable cycle, you'll be able to kind of plan when that's going to be, or predict when that's going to be. What are your warning signs? So what are the things that you might notice are kind of negative or toxic behaviors that you might start doing? Maybe it's things that you start feeling in your body. It might be that you physical symptoms as well. And how can you manage or mitigate against that? So if you're in your luteal phase and you know you're going to have a high symptom burden, it's probably not the time to be going out 3 nights a week, having late nights, drinking loads of alcohol, and then compensating with loads of coffee the next morning. Think about self-care. Think about perhaps having a less busy social calendar. What are the things that make you feel well? Is it that you like doing walks out in nature, or Pilates, or yoga? that this is all really important about building this self-care toolkit. The other thing that's really important is diet. So we can often have in our luteal phase food cravings and want to have a lot of chocolate or sweet foods, which causes glucose dysregulation and can kind of further, those kind of peaks can further exacerbate mood symptoms and things like bloating. So we want to be trying to have plant-rich, balanced foods, trying to make sure that we're getting a lot of good vitamins and antioxidants and minerals in there. So things like methylated B vitamins, vitamin D can be really helpful from a dietary perspective, or if you want to try supplementing with supplements. But also making sure that we are having 3 regular meals a day, that we're kind of nourishing our body, we're supporting our body across this luteal transition. And then I think there are other things that are important to do about who you can ask for help. So obviously as a medical professional, I'm one of those people, but who are those around you if you are having some of those more scary thoughts, if you are feeling really low, what is your support structure? What's your crisis plan in that situation? Who am I going to turn to? So this is the kind of foundational layer that we spend a lot of time going through, making sure that we've got that right before we come on and talk about any other additional treatments that I might be offering as a healthcare professional.
I love this, and I wish that I had had something like this when I was going through PMDD, because I do, I did have some awareness over time that it was cyclical, and there were, points at which the diagnosis of PMDD was suggested to me. And I do remember there were a couple days where I just felt like a fog, in my brain and a fog in my mood. And it was as if like a cloud had gone over the sun. That's the way that I would describe it. And during that time, I still had some control over my ability to muster my own resources, to ask for help, to make plans, to put processes in place that could protect me when the time came that was just a complete, the blackout periods where I had no joy, I had no energy, I had no motivation, and I was at times suicidal, and I had no plan. I had no, I was away, or, possibly by that time had completely alienated my partner, and I had no support structure in place, or processes that I could use to bring myself back. And then it just became a kind of waiting game, and I did very much feel like a sort of, like a victim in my life, rather than with something like this, you're very much in control. Like, this is a tremendously empowering worksheet that you can create for yourself when you're feeling really good, in service to yourself who may be feeling like really terrible at a certain future point.
Yeah, so I think you've highlighted an important point there, which is, make this plan when you're feeling well.
Yeah.
Make this plan when for most people, that's probably in that early sort of follicular phase up to ovulation. Make the plan when you've got that kind of strategic energy to do that, and do that with people around you that also are aware of what your triggers might be and what things are likely to be helpful. Yeah. And for me, this is so essential to go through this exercise before we think about prescribing, a treatment. Yeah. We don't want to. I think there's a tendency historically to perhaps just offer the contraceptive pill straight away. Yeah. And whilst that is a really valuable tool for some women, we want to be able to build this awareness in where we can. Obviously, some women's symptoms are very severe, and we might need to move on to treatment more quickly. But if we can build in this piece first, that's often really helpful to set the foundations for future success in terms of treatment.
Absolutely. I think that's amazing that you said that let's do this first, and let's see what we can put in place for you, and then we'll see what we can layer on top of that, so you actually have the data and and the sort of framework in place, which can then be further supported by additional types of resources and potentially pharmaceuticals or alternative treatments.
Absolutely. In terms of treatments, I won't go, there are lots of different options available. I won't go spend too much time on them, but more broadly, I always recommend, even to all women, that kind of a cognitive behavioral therapy approach is going to be beneficial, because it will help with building this toolkit, this coping strategy toolkit for you. And that can be really, really powerful as a tool. So if you haven't had that before, I will be recommending that. And then there are various layers of treatment depending on success and severity. But they kind of broadly fall into mood regulating treatments like antidepressants, and then also your cycle suppression treatments. Before that, there are an abundance of different supplements that we might try. I think we're in a situation at the moment, sadly, where nutrition research is quite lacking, and so a lot of the supplements that we have available aren't heavily researched, although we do have guidance on the ones that are likely to provide some support. So there are a few that I would look to recommend, including methylated B vitamins, vitamin D, possibly calcium. So yeah, lots of things available. I think the key is trying to build up that understanding of diagnosis and getting help, because there is lots of help available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what you're saying about the different options and being able to try different things. I think one point I wanted to know is that it's really important, and this kind of goes to the cognitive behavioral piece, like to view each of those attempts as a means of gathering information. And if it doesn't work, there's no shame, there's no guilt, there's no sort of catastrophizing, like, well, then if this doesn't work, nothing's going to work. Like, every step is a step toward a more balanced, more peaceful, kind of more empowered version of you that has the support that you need. And I think for me, every time I tried something new, I was just like, well, I am just more broken. If it didn't work, well, that is just because of me. And there's a lot of shame and guilt that piles into that I think if you have these resources and you have a place where you can mark the data down, it almost helps to militate against that sort of an approach, because you're like, well, this is just data. And like, it feels really personal, but actually I'm just putting in the spreadsheet. This is the information I'm gathering from my healthcare professional. And now I know that I need to go and take a bath, right? Like, in the Good Girl to Goddess program, we have this thing called a bliss list, which we recommend that every woman puts together, which is the list of things that absolutely light you up and that can serve as mood support for you in times when things are rough, for any reason that might be the case. So you can say, okay, I need a quick, circuit breaker, joy creator. I'm going to go to my bliss list and pull something off that list, and I'm going to do it right now, like whatever that would be.
I love that. I'm going to take that into my clinical practice. Definitely. Bliss list. Love that.
Amazing.
So a quick whistle-stop tour of premenstrual syndromes and PMDD. Wanted to just talk a bit about perimenopause and menopause, because these are, again, another hormonal vulnerability phase for women that we perhaps don't talk enough about until we're actually in it, and then we're trying to gather information. So just to go back to terminology, the menopause is actually just a single day. So it's the day that your periods have stopped for 12 months. The preceding transition, where hormonal levels are starting to fluctuate and decline, your periods may still be regular. They don't have to become irregular. This is called perimenopause. And it actually can last a really long time. So it's sort of typically around a few years. That's sort of 7 years is average, but it can go on to beyond a decade, so up to 14 years. So it's not uncommon for women in their late 30s to start having a degree of hormonal change, to perhaps not necessarily, having that awareness that it could be perimenopause. It's a busy time of life, midlife in general. So a lot of women will say to me, how do I know it's hormones and not the fact that my children are up in the night, or my mum's in hospital, or I've got a really busy job, or my partner's driving me crazy? It's a bit of a crunch point anyway. So again, it comes back to that information gathering.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I think the message to drive home is there's not an easy blood test to diagnose perimenopause. It's very much based on the clinical symptom profile that you've got. And sometimes that might, if you haven't got I think most people initially would go and speak to their GP. If you haven't got a GP that's kind of tuned into women's health, that can sometimes be a challenging conversation, because bloods are likely to be normal. So if you're offered a blood test and you're mid-40s, the chances are that they will be normal because they fluctuate so much. So this is a diagnosis based on your symptoms. I think it's helpful to take a symptom tracker and to do a symptom tracker to those appointments, because then you can start to again build this picture up and say, this is what I think is possibly going on. Can we have a conversation about it? And I think I've shared in the resources a menopause symptom.
Yes,
we
you
just
have.
share it on the screen.
Up now. Let's see. Here we go. Has that come up?
I've still got the
That's
PMDD
weird.
one on my one. I don't know
Okay,
if anyone else has got.
Close that. There we go.
There we go. So this is one that I've used in my clinic. It's based on a sort of national menopause symptom guideline called the Green Climacteric Scale. I've added a few questions in there as well, particularly about things like bladder and vaginal health. And as you can see, the symptom profile is so broad. So we have estrogen receptors all over our body. I think the historical picture of menopause just being about hot flushes is outdated, and we know that actually some of the more common symptoms that women will present with in the perimenopause are psychological symptoms. So maybe it's irritability, or rage is one that women quite often say, I feel really angry and I don't know why. But again, so much power in understanding our bodies and then being able to have that conversation with family or with a healthcare professional about whether this is likely to be going on and what we can do about it. So you've gone through the perimenopause, you reach the menopause, and then I think it's important to note that the postmenopause, which is another term you'll hear, is actually 30% of our, a third of our life. So historically, if you go back 200, 300 years, women weren't really living much longer after they went through menopause because life expectancy has increased so much. Yeah. This is our third of our life. So we really need to be clued up about what these hormonal changes mean for us in terms of the effects on our bones and our cardiovascular health and our brain health, so that we can start to make lifestyle choices that are kind of mitigating against that. One of the really powerful pieces of research that I think has come out recently, which I think is so validating for women going through this transition, and I know we've spoken about it, Sabrina, is an amazing neuroscientist called Lisa Mosconi. I recommend everyone reads her book. She's got loads of books, but there's one on the female brain and one on the menopause brain. She did this beautiful study. There's so little research into the female brain outside of reproduction and sexual function. So when anyone does anything else into what the brain does for a woman, I'm really excited. So she has looked at the premenopausal, so before any changes, and the postmenopausal brain. And she is able to show that total energy expenditure, she put a tracer and she did scans on the brain. The total energy expenditure in a woman that's perimenopausal or menopausal is down by 30% in the brain. So it's not just in your head. There is an actual change in the way that your brain is able to use energy. And this is what's likely to contribute to feelings of brain fog, forgetfulness, difficulty with concentration. Wow. So it's a really stunning image. I Google it, it's there on Google, and it will show you that you have this lit up premenopausal brain, and then you can see this dampening down, about 30% dampening down in the postmenopausal brain.
Wow.
So interesting. Yeah, so whistle stop tour there.
And what sort of resources are available? Oh, Pankti, sorry, do you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead. I just wanted to say, I've been very interested, obviously, in this topic, but I'm assuming my thinking is correct. The symptoms that you experience throughout all different phases might change. So there were some symptoms that I didn't experience before, which obviously I have started experiencing, and I'm definitely going to look at that tracker to see where I am in that journey, because obviously... But it's helpful to know that there is this tracker, because every time you try and speak to a doctor, it's not very it's like, okay, maybe you should just go on a some kind of medication. You're like, no, there's more to it than that,
So I think with symptom profiles, there's not one size fits all. about 85% of women will have a degree of symptoms, and 25% will have severe symptoms. Now, I think that 85%, if you actually drill down and got to the detail, it would probably be more like 100%, because most women have something. You're right in that as you go through perimenopause, into menopause, into postmenopause, those symptoms will change, and that will be a unique journey to you. There are some symptoms that we know are likely to be more chronic and progressive. So certainly genitourinary symptoms, so bladder symptoms and vaginal symptoms, these do tend to get worse with time. And there's very few women that can't have something like a vaginal estrogen, which is very low dose and safe for the majority of women. So we talk a lot about bladders and vaginas in my consultations. But other symptoms like hot flushes are likely to be get better as you kind of go into the postmenopausal transition when there's less hormonal chaos. So yeah, it will vary from women to women. I think there's a question I saw.
Yes.
Let me see if I can get the chat. You might need to read it to me, Sabrina.
I'll read it. Are there any symptoms that help differentiate depression and perimenopause? I know so many women being given antidepressants at the stage when they feel it could be related potentially to menopause or perimenopause.
That's such a good question. And you're right that historically there was a massive over-prescribing of antidepressants for women who were entering into this transition, and that women would be much more likely to receive an antidepressant than they would be to have a conversation about other treatments like hormonal replacement therapy, for example. We know that for women who've had no history of mental illness, there is an increase in de novo, so new presentation depressive symptoms in the perimenopause and menopause. And that's because estrogen is a master regulator of important neurochemicals like serotonin and dopamine in the brain. So those shifts will also happen. I think it can sometimes be tricky to distinguish the two. I think we need to be mindful that even if you're meeting criteria for depressive symptoms, if it's happening in the time that you're also experiencing other perimenopause and menopausal symptoms, we now have very clear guidance from the NICE guidance that you can still use things like hormonal replacement therapy as a treatment for mood-related symptoms in the perimenopause and menopause, and that they are likely to be very effective. I do have women who need both, and we take, it's very individualized. So some women might not have got that full response from hormones, and so we might think about introducing something like an antidepressant. And equally, some women who can't or choose not to take HRT, we do know that SSRIs, for example, can also be helpful for things like hot flushes. So some of my patients with breast cancer, for example, might be taking those as well as treating their mood symptoms with them. So, really it's about spending time with you and understanding when these symptoms came up, what they're looking like. Is there any variability as well? Because often PMS can present as one of the early perimenopause symptoms. So a heightening of PMS is quite an early symptom as well.
Wow, that's super helpful. And I mean, it goes back to that, collect the data, collect your own data kind of point that we've been making through this whole webinar. And it brings us to the next question, actually, which is, at what age do you think it's important to talk to our daughters about recording and tracking the data in their menstrual cycles?
Oh, it's a good one. I think the earlier the better, really. When you first start your periods, they're likely to be quite chaotic and irregular initially. But I think once they're starting to get kind of menstrual cycles that are regular, it's such a powerful tool. Menstrual education, if it does happen in schools, is again quite focused around period products and the actual period, but they don't really talk about the hormonal fluctuations. So if you can build that in, not just our daughters, but our sons and men as well, then I think we're hopefully empowering women and men boys to become men, to feel it, to have that kind of appreciation of how hormones can affect women across all parts of life, including in the workplace.
I love that. I love that. Pankti, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's the thing. I mean, topic is even more interesting to me only because I have two girls and I don't want them to have the same problems that I had or the issues that I had, and I would like to empower them. So definitely, I would encourage more of an open discussion. They can take a lot more than we give them credit for, can't they? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have another question actually for you specifically, Pankti. Would the helpful productivity tool you presented, would that work for young women and girls as well?
I don't see why not in terms of obviously Anna, chip in if you think. I feel obviously once they are set in that cycle, maybe the first few years, it's just
Mm,
understanding. But definitely, the younger you start becoming more aware of what your body does and when you feel what, I think it will be quite significant for a lot of women. Like, I mean, definitely I was thinking you should start this when you start a career, but I don't see why not in your teenage years or when you are studying or doing things. Maybe you could definitely do that. Sure.
I mean, I went to an all-girls secondary school, and I don't think any of the teachers were thinking about how our menstrual cycles were affecting our behavior and our ability to focus, and whether or not we were being naughty or whether we were being impulsive. And I mean, maybe that's changed. It's been a while since I've been at secondary school, but I think it's so empowering for both the teachers and the educators as well as the pupils to kind of talk openly about this and create an inclusive and sharing culture, because then you can change things and you can put adaptations in place to get the best out of everyone. Yeah,
yeah, and
I think it should be talked about.
yeah, I think also like that the younger you can get your children of either gender to be thinking about what their bodies are doing and what their bodies are telling them, the better. And I think it's a really for young women, it's a big kind of wake up call. Like my body is doing things now that are not within my control. And it's the most obvious sort of pivotal moment when that happens. And so it's a good sort of entry into, well, maybe I should start, keeping track of this. And I also wondered if either one of you are aware of any resources for young men around women's periods, because if it doesn't exist, we need to create it. Like I want something that I can give to my son to just be like, look, babe, this doesn't happen to me anymore, but it's gonna happen to probably all the women that you date. So here you go.
I mean, I'm sure there are resources out there. I know with some of the period tracking apps, you can share a profile with
Oh,
a
that's
partner, or
great.
so they get an alert. Your partner's entering their luteal phase. Be warned.
Me,
So
me, me.
yeah. So yeah, I'm sure there are, and if there aren't, I'll create one for you.
Amazing.
No, and also I think it's about this open discussion, right? Like the way we have with the girls, it's about opening up the conversation and not making it like something that you don't talk, you only talk about it behind doors, and it's not something that you discuss with people about. And I think the other thing that I as a mother personally feel is every time if you have based on how when most of us have children, when they're entering the puberty, you're entering the phase of menopause or perimenopause. So it's like everyone's hormonal. Becoming aware of that might help.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think if you look historically to, ancient and more recent history, like cultures have had sort of ceremonies around women who, when they start their period, and really celebrating that as sort of rite of passage into the world, into this new responsibility of creation, and like the miracle around that, like it's so normalized what women can do, and what the this cycle empowers us to do in terms of creating new people. But it's like if you really just step back and think about it, it's incredible. Like I have a good friend who's pregnant right now, and I'm just like, every time I see her, I'm like, you're a magician, you're creating a little person, like this is amazing, and it isn't obviously just about childbearing. It's also just this idea that we have cycles in our bodies that are going to empower us to do certain things at certain times and different things at different times, and it's an invitation to go more deeply into an intimate relationship of awareness and and care and compassion with our bodies, to step into that as an empowering perspective, which is what this whole webinar is about, rather than accepting the narrative of like, okay, well, you started your period, now you better go get some tampons.
And I think the same is for menopause, and particularly in Western cultures, it can feel like there's quite a narrative that's negative.
Yeah.
Women often say to me, "Oh, society's telling me I'm past it." Whereas actually, if you look at other cultures, it's this celebration of wisdom. It's this, often in Eastern cultures, it's described as a second spring. It's a time to prioritize yourself, to take care of yourself, and to share that wisdom with others. So definitely the narrative will influence the personal experience, and if we can shift that, or at least have awareness of it in Western cultures, and put a barrier to it, then that can often help with how we feel about it ourselves.
Yes.
No, definitely. I would like to add to it. I mean, I know I come from an East culture, and where it is, when you've passed that phase, you tap into your creative potential way more, because that's when you start doing new projects, setting up new ventures, and it's amazing to see how many women in their late 50s, 60s start up new things and are very successful at it. Something they haven't thought about when they were in their 30s or 40s.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's such an empowering perspective as well. I think if the more support we can get, because I know, especially in the industry that I've come from, the sort of finance and law, like a lot of women, when they get into perimenopause and menopause, they just leave because they don't have the support that they need. There isn't the awareness around what they might need within the workplace, and in terms of helping them manage those symptoms and manage as well their balance of work and life and going through all of that. So like raising awareness around what's happening to women during the menopause, but also what support and resources are available to help keep them feeling positive and energized and well, is so important to our society. Like I think about, for young women who are going into law or finance, that are watching their mentors just leave. They don't have the sort of champions in women who are more senior to them, and they don't have the wealth of experience that can be shared with young professionals and young women. It's heartbreaking. And then on the other hand, if they're leaving because they have discovered their true calling, or they've got this second spring, like more power to you, like go and do the thing. Like I can say from my own personal experience that, as my son approached his kind of adult stages, like I had this incredible burst of creative energy that was in part probably due to having so much of my time and energy freed up, because I obviously was already on HRT by that time, but like I started one business and then I started another business, and I was just like, all these ideas are coming to me and inspiration, and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is an exhilarating existence, and an exciting time to be alive, which I think is a much more empowering and purposeful narrative than than where I feel that I'm being discarded, or I'm put me out to pasture, I'm not useful as a woman anymore. And there's so much toxic narrative around women having this use, and once that's over, then they aren't they aren't useful anymore. Like it's horrific, and absolutely needs to be countered with the truth, which is that women just keep getting more powerful throughout their lives. There's no moment when there's a dimming of the light. The light just keeps getting brighter, and that's that's the existence that I'm living, and that I think is available for every woman. All right, I'm going to check in with our attendees to see if there are any other questions for the panelists. And also just, kind of mention that we will have the replay available. We have made all of the resources available, so you can use those. And I'm sure both Anna and Painty, you would be, happy to take questions after the event as well. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you can support those who are watching this now and in the replay. And if they want to get in touch with you, the best way to do that. Painty, let's start with you.
Sure. So, like I said, I'm a productivity expert. I work as a coach and I help a lot of my clients who are mainly women in terms of working through and creating a lifestyle that gives them that balance, makes them more effective and more productive so they can step up into management roles in financial services industry or the creative industry. Like I have worked with a lot of authors and I've helped them understand this and use this to their advantage when they are publishing or writing about their books. So it is open to a lot. And I offer one-on-one support, a 90-minute dive down as well, and group coaching. So it's open, everyone can learn from each other, and you can connect with me either on LinkedIn or Instagram, and you'll find me on both those platforms. So definitely. And even if you don't want to work, you just have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them and help you.
Thank you, Pankti. Anna.
Yes, so I'll also put my details in the chat. So you can see me in Westminster Women's Clinic in person. I offer clinical consultations there that are female health focused. So that includes postnatal consultations, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, as well as thinking about perimenopause and menopause. And I can also do that virtually. My other big passion is education. So through my website, which I'll link as well, I have my first menopause course, which is only a tenner, and it's there to basically give you a deep dive into all of the foundations of good menopause care. So it's a holistic approach. It's not just about HRT. It's very much about looking at things like sleep, nutrition, how we move our bodies, and going into the detail, understanding what hormone changes are happening at that stage. So yeah, I'm very happy to give you guys a code as well, Sabrina, so that people can access that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And in terms of me and Good Girl to Goddess, I'm available anytime at sabrina@ggtg.me. The Good Girl to Goddess program is available through ggtg.me if you want to check that out. It's £315 to join for a year's access. And I basically say to women, come work with us. We have group sessions every other week. I create cohorts of 8 to 10 women. So you will always have time and a voice, to be heard. And then by adopting the daily practices, mindset shifts, and ways of using relationships as mirrors to our inner world and our growth and what needs to be healed, I know that at the end of the year, you will look back and you will be telling yourself a completely different story about your life from an empowered perspective of authenticity and joy, rather than where you may be now, maybe, struggling with things, feeling like a victim in your life, feeling like you maybe don't have control. We're going to rewrite that script. That's what we do at GGTG, into something that is much more empowering. It is the truth, rather than what you may have been told throughout your childhood and in terms of self-limiting beliefs and things that you've carried with you into adulthood. We don't have to follow any of those anymore because we are adults and we have control over our lives and our minds and our agency, and we want to bring that out into the world. And like I said before, the world really needs us. So that is why we are here. And I just, before we finish, I would like to thank Pankti and Anna so much for sharing your wisdom with us. It is deeply, deeply appreciated. And thank you for supporting women the way that you do every single day, and for bringing your goddess selves into the world, in service to all of us. I am just in complete awe of both of you. So thank you so, so much. If you have any final words that you'd like to give to our audience, that would be great.
First of all, thank you, Sabrina, for having me. And it was a pleasure being here. And all I want to do is let's change the narrative on your hormones and start working with your body, because it's like we've discussed, it's amazing and you can do much more with it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I'll echo that. Thank you so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure. I'm so passionate about talking about women's health, and I think my takeaway message would be start by building that awareness in, get symptom tracking, get cycle tracking, get to know your normal, and then that's really empowering for having those discussions with your healthcare professionals.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you to all of you who joined us today and who watch in the replay. You are the reason why I do all of this. So I hope that that has been useful to you. And as we said, you have lots of different ways to get in touch with our speakers, lots of resources to use. So track that data and take the narrative back in an empowering way for your own life so you can go out there and kill it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you at the next one.